Happy Wednesday. Today's October 30th, 11 a.m. roughly Eastern Time. My name is Emily Sherio, and I am super happy to be here and hosting our panel today. So we've got a great panel talking about data jobs. We'll be talking about data resumes, applications, and job search tips, especially in the current macro environment. We've got a great panel. We've got Taylor, Brian, Andie, and Nick here. I'll let them introduce themselves. If you're in a place where you can keep your camera on, please do. No worries hanging out on mute, but it's a little bit easier for panelists to not be talking to a black screen if you are in a place where you can turn yourself on. Even if you're going to be answering emails and doing other stuff the whole time, it's totally fine. We're going to keep this super conversational, so please feel free to come off mute and ask questions yourself. You can also post them in the chat. If you do post questions in the chat, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and read them yourself. No pressure if you're in a place where you can't do that. And so with that, let's go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll go in that same order that I mentioned: Brian, Taylor, Andie, Nick. So go ahead and say your name, where you're based out of, and your current role. And then we'll jump into like panel specific context in a little bit. So Brian, kick us off.
Sure. My name is Brian Toole. I'm based out of Westland, Oregon, a bit south of Portland, and I'm the senior data engineer slash only data engineer at Steno.
Hi, good morning. My name is Taylor. I'm currently a recruiter at Valier. We acquired Brooklyn Data Co., which some of you may know a little bit better, last year. And I'm based out of Chicago.
Hi, I'm Andie. I'm based in New York, and I'm currently the Associate Director of Data Operations / Analytics Engineering at a nonprofit called Understood.
And I'm Nick. Hopefully you can hear me. My headphones turned off for a second there. Okay, perfect. All right. I'm Nick. I'm also based out of Chicago, but I'm going to say I'm in the Chicago suburbs because I don't know if Taylor is in the city and is going to correct me for being in the suburbs, Chicago thing. I am the Senior Director of Analytics at Settle.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm really excited to dig in. Just a reminder to folks who are here, we're going to be using the Slack channel, Meetup Data Jobs. That's a great place to share resources as we go through the conversation. Please feel free to have all of your chats there. But if you post things in the Zoom chat, this is a small enough group that it won't get lost. So today, as a reminder, we'll be talking a little bit about data roles, especially in the current macro environment. We see that some of the most popular threads in Slack over and over are about getting a job, switching jobs, should I quit my job, how do I get a job, can someone review my resume, career advice. And so this is like an evergreen topic. And I think the context we're in the current macro environment, where it is harder to get a job, not just in high technology, but across the board, is mostly true for knowledge workers. So let's go ahead and each of the panelists are here because they bring a very specific experience to the panel around hiring or getting a new role in the last year. So let's go in reverse order from how we did our intros. So Nick, Andie, uh, uh, Taylor, then Brian. Can you talk about your experience with the job market this year?
Sure. I can start kicking us off, I guess. So I started a new job in March of this year as sort of like leading a data team. So sort of had a little bit of exposure finding a job in this job market. And then from there, built out a small, nimble, very lean team of 2 people hiring. So I've been hiring a little bit in this market as well. So like mine's been a little bit of both, I'd say.
Cool. Yeah, I started my current role about a year, actually almost a year ago to like the T. So it was definitely looking for a job. I had been laid off from my previous role, kind kind of in the spring, May 2023, and was kind of searching for jobs all summer. So definitely have experience searching for jobs. We haven't hired directly on my team yet this year, but we did hire an intern. So somewhat familiar with, the job process for that.
I came on board at Valier last August following the acquisition of BDC and took over the recruiting for data engineers, analytics engineers, and data analysts. I would say by December, so I'm a little bit newer to engineering recruiting, but I have seen a shift within the past several months of we're getting a lot more applicants for positions where previously it was a little bit harder to find qualified candidates for our roles.
I've been with Steno now for, it was about 8 months, a bit over. And I'd say my hiring here was a little on the niche and counter to the job market side, where I started looking casually and then happened to know someone that had a position that just posted. So I applied and I let them know. And I don't know if that was just coincidence or if it did actually fast track me, but then I ended up going through the process here and starting on pretty quickly to fill a gap where they had a pretty strong transactional environment. They had a pretty established but small analytics team, and they knew that they wanted to introduce some actual transformation layer, but they didn't really know where to go with that. And so it was a kind of fill a very specific gap sort of role that I came into. Typical startup life.
I love the variety of experiences, and I really appreciate all of you coming today. And I think this panel is going to be really useful. As a reminder, folks, don't worry about holding your questions to the end. So please do feel free to post questions in Slack, post them in the chat. We'll make sure to get through them. I have some questions that we'll use to get started, but I'm not on the job market, so your questions are probably more interesting if you've got them. Why don't we go ahead and jump in? So my first question, for those who recently started in your roles, and you can define recently however you'd like, talk about what strategies or techniques you used in standing out during your job search. So Brian, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you mentioned like you had a prior relationship. Maybe you can share a little bit about how you leveraged those throughout your search, even in opportunities that didn't materialize, and then anyone else can add there.
Yeah, and I think having that connection, having at least a toe in the door, maybe not a full foot, but just the slight little potential entry point really helps out a lot. It did help me get, at this time I was interviewing for a couple companies and there were two going at the same time. Both of them, I happened to know someone from a previous job that was handling the recruiting side. And so found out about them, or yes, found out about the position before I found out about them being connected to it. And then I tried to reach out to them and see if they could fast track me or anything like that. But it's tough being a candidate because you don't really know how your connections will help you. But from my experience, they do. I just haven't been on the kind of other side of being that connection, so I can't provide too much insight into that. But and when I was looking, it was really just a matter of presenting myself as not just my technical skills, but what it would be like to work with me, even if that's, pushing back on a potential requirement within, not really a requirement, but pushing a little against part of the hiring process in some way. As a data engineer, I think, and this is going off topic a bit, but data engineering roles in particular are kind of a mess because there are so many different varieties of data engineer, and each role is going to have a different set of skills. So when I was applying, when I was looking for jobs, I knew that I wanted to work with a more modern stack. I wanted to work with dbt, some SQL heavy role. And what I found is a lot of data engineering positions were advertising, need a high level of Python expertise or something like that for a role where, based on the job description, Python wasn't really required, or the modern stack can use it depending on what you're doing, but it's hard to figure out if the role you're looking at is actually a good fit for you. And so to test that a little bit, when I would apply, when I would talk to hiring managers, when I talk to the recruiting team, I would actually push to figure out what their hiring process was like, what their take-home process was like, or their technical assessment. And if it seemed like it was assessing something that I wasn't comfortable with, I would actually push and say, I can use X language. So Python's the example. I can use Python to connect to an API, but I'm not a Python developer. So if your technical assessment is going to be doing some algorithmic Python challenge, that's not going to be a good reflection of me. So when you're kind of hiring, or when you're looking for a job, when you're interviewing, don't be afraid to push and say, what you're trying to assess, I question if that's really what you want. And I've had luck doing that. I've had, and it's not always going to be a win. I've had some companies come back and say, no, we actually really do need this. And so we just cut ties right there. Others would say, okay, well, let's see how we can adapt our assessment to really analyze what you're bringing. So I think if you bring a level of confidence in yourself and your abilities to that process, don't be afraid to challenge that process to a degree. You might not get anywhere with it, but it's not going to hurt you by any means.
Taylor, I'm curious if you have a reaction to some of Brian's tips.
Yeah, I can speak to obviously being on the other side of having that connection. Candidly, I am still building my connections within the data world, but I've been in recruiting for over a decade. So it definitely helps to already have known a candidate or to have already placed them previously. But we are also one piece of the hiring puzzle, right? So hiring managers do trust me and my experience, and me being able to say, hey, I know Brian, I've put him up for this position, I placed him here. That definitely helps, but it's still also going through that interview process and making sure that that candidate is a fit for the position.
I think on the technical side you talked about, Brian, where you're talking about like the technical assessment piece. So I've administered quite a few technical assessments at this point in my career, and a lot of the what I'm looking for is not that you have perfect syntax in your Python thing. It's more so like the assessment of like, hey, I gave you sort of an ambiguous challenge. How do you think through that? And so oftentimes that I will just like, you get a take home and then I go, now explain what you did. Why did you make that choice? Why did you pick this? And it is much less about the syntax thing and like how much you know about that knowledge or like about that language and whatnot. Don't get me wrong, like SQL, we test, like, do you know joins? Do you know all those things? Modern data stack is all SQL. But like on the Python side, it's more like, hey, I have an ambiguous problem. How do you solve that ambiguous problem? How do you handle your rationale and your thinking process around that? I think that is more what, and so like, you probably get through the interview, even though saying like, hey, Python's not my strength. But then you can be like, here's what I did in Python. Here's how I would solve it in SQL, which is my preferred language. And if you can show those things, I'm like, oh, cool. You just don't know this tool. I can send you to a Python course if that's a requirement. But that's sort of how I think about like that process and breaking it down into like a little bit of a like what I'm looking for out of that interviewing step.
Not everyone does think like that though, and that's the challenge as a candidate, and that's something that I've been able to leverage my connections to do before, just try and get some insight into how the hiring manager and how the hiring team is going to approach that and assess that. So it's
in those situations, who does the technical interview? Because in my experience, if it's done sort of by the like higher up, it's generally a little bit more vague. Or if it's done by like a senior IC, it's usually like, I need you to know these things because I did these things. And so I think that to me, it matters who's assessing you.
Right. And I think that's something that, I've used the connection in the past to figure that out, reach out to the recruiting contact, say, hey, how is this being assessed? What kind of assessment is it? Is it with the hiring manager themselves? Is it with an engineer? Is it with a panel? You don't just need to use your connections to get that toe in the door, that foot in the door, but you can also use them to get information about the process as a whole. And I think that's, to me, more valuable as an applicant, to figure out what they're looking at, what they're looking for, who you're going to be working with or meeting with, if at all.
I would like to add a couple of things from the employer standpoint. So I think it depends on the employer and the team size. So for us, our engineering teams are 15 to 20 folks. And if we're hiring somebody at the mid-level, then we might be a little bit more open to individuals that have used different tools, where we can say, hey, we can provide that mentorship and on-the-job learning and send you to a class so you become more experienced in this technology. But other times, if we're hiring at the staff level, we just don't have that bandwidth to be able to provide on-the-job learning, because we expect somebody at that very senior level to have the specific skills that we're looking for. So I think it depends on the team size, what tools that they're using, to see if they're going to be super specific or if they're going to have a little bit more bandwidth. And then also, I think when we're thinking about the employer side as well, I think just, again, in terms of having that relationship is great, but any good recruiter should be telling a candidate from the first call what that interview process is going to look like, who they're going to meet with, and they should be carrying them throughout that process to prep them for those interviews. So when I'm talking to a candidate and I'm having that initial conversation, I'm setting expectations from the get-go, where we are discussing the budget so that there isn't any discrepancy once we get to the offer stage and we have a $50,000 gap. I'm talking about the interview process, how many steps they can expect. And then for the engineering role, specifically the technical pieces. So for us at BDC and Valier, we have essentially two technical rounds. One, we have that take-home test that's provided via CoderByte. And then if the candidate passes that test, they're going to meet with two senior team members, where it's not going to be as hardcore as the take-home assessment, but it is going to be more technically focused, where not only are you skilled at handling that assessment on your computer, but you can also speak to the work that you're handling, because we expect our candidates, or sorry, our employees, to be able to speak to our clients.
And I think there's definitely kind of an emphasis on some of those soft skills as well, especially when you think about, this is the first job. I'm currently in our office. I'm in a hybrid role right now, so in the office 3 days a week. But prior to that, my last two roles had been totally remote. And I think especially in those remote roles, and even in hybrid roles to a certain extent, you're really expected to create your own relationships with people. Even if you're not in an externally facing business, the onus is kind of on you to kind of reach out to people for virtual coffee chats or check-ins or one-on-ones in a way that I think in office work kind of just lent itself to a little bit more. And so I think even if you are in a highly technical role, and you're still an IC, I think being able to kind of be resourceful, both with like, how do you code and how should I solve this problem, to finding the right people and resources on the team, I think that's definitely something that people are looking for more and more now.
I love this conversation. I think we've gotten a variety of perspectives. I'm really interested as the market has changed, or even like right now, what are people seeing in terms of technical assessments and soft skill assessments in the interviewing process? We can break it down by role. We cannot break it down by role, just kind of speak to it generally. But I think we often talk about technical assessments as like a particular interview in the interviewing process. Are you seeing 1 of 5 interviews as a technical assessment? Taylor mentioned 2. Like, are you being tech tested at every stage? What are people seeing, hearing? And then as a hiring manager, what are you doing?
Yeah, I can answer that. As someone that I applied to probably I would say like 50 jobs that I had in my tracker, but I don't think that includes any of the jobs that I had just like easy applied to on LinkedIn that were like, I probably won't get this, but I'll throw my name in the ring. So I would say I definitely, and I applied for both IC roles and manager roles. I would say it's definitely a mix. Yeah, Brian, +1. It's a tough job market out there. So yeah, I think you gotta throw your name out there and kind of see what sticks. There's definitely a part of that element, to be candid. I think that there's definitely a mix in terms of like case studies, and as well, like some more take-home assignments and then also coding assignments. I haven't found as many places would kind of do the live SQL testing and do like a take home thing. I have often found it's kind of a take home and then you kind of talk about it, some of which includes like actually talking through the SQL and some of it doesn't. Again, just depending on the role. But at least from an interviewee perspective, I kind of found those more interesting, I think, than kind of the coding stuff. Maybe to Brian's point, like I definitely felt like if it was a good case study where I was like, oh, I would be interested in solving this business problem and translating that into technical terms, I definitely got like a better sense, I think. So maybe also as like a hiring manager too, like it's not something you think about, but I ended up getting 2 job offers. And I think one of them, honestly, a factor in the job I'm currently in is I think that the case study was actually like no code at all, but kind of thinking more about architecturally, how would I solve this problem and creating like a DAG in DBT. And I thought that that was really well thought out in terms of being able to test, like, can I translate like my SQL mind or my Python mind into like actually relaying this to someone who may or may not be technical.
I think that's a good point about them not necessarily being focused on one particular area and trying to gather information from different aspects. You know, my current role, we had a kind of a live just SQL challenge. They set up a couple of tables, a database to query, and asked a couple questions, and I threw those together and talked through. I was used to Postgres and or used to Snowflake, and they were assessing in Postgres. I've used Postgres in the past, but it wasn't a regular language. So, of course, syntactical things. I'm like, oh, if we were on Snowflake, I could use this and this, and I would just talk about what I would try and do, and then like, oh, in Postgres you can do this, or yeah, you can't do that in Postgres. So there'd be a conversational element there. In the past, at my last job, I was actually kind of discouraged by all of the technical challenges I had seen before, because again, as a data engineer, a lot of what's out there is algorithmic stuff. And as a data engineer, you're really not going to be doing algorithmic coding. You're going to be connecting to APIs, you're going to be querying data, you're going to be manipulating data, something like that. It's not going to be, write a Python script that traverses this, array and sorts it in reverse order or something like that. And so I was frustrated. I didn't like how a lot of the like HackerRank and things like that did their SQL prompts, either because they're often ambiguous and it wasn't really clear what was going on. So when we were hiring for a couple of engineers or an engineer, we set up a little challenge, and I actually created a pull request scenario where I had a DBT project, a mini DBT project, and said, assume everything runs. We couldn't actually have them run it and test it or anything like that. But, a few statements, assume everything runs, logic is correct. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's the pull request to do that. And then ask the candidate to hop on a call with us and actually review it live with us, and give us thoughts. And there'd be everything from syntactical changes to stylistic differences. We would include a style guide with the sample project, and then have the PR actually intentionally violate the style guide and things like that, and see what people would catch. Some people caught the stylistic stuff. Some people questioned the actual analytics modeling approach, and we would duplicate logic. We would maybe make things not as dry as they should be. It was just it wasn't wrong for the sake of being wrong. It wasn't tricky just to trip people up, but it was things that you would likely encounter if you were looking at someone else's PR. And we wanted to see someone's thought process and how they would analyze that, because we were going to be working with them. We wanted to know what working with them was like. And I think that's one of the things that's really hard to assess in a lot of the standard technical challenges you see out there. And I think that's why you'll get to see some places do a little take-home assignment, but then also a panel interview or a architectural discussion or something like that to try and cover the range. I think if you see a job that's just a technical challenge, as a data engineer, I'd be concerned because I wouldn't, to me, that says the company doesn't know what they're looking for and they don't know how to assess their candidates properly.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. I would love to ask specifically to the hiring managers on the panel. So if you've hired someone in the last, whatever time range feels right, is there any specific skills or experiences that have made a candidate really stand out? Or on the other side of the coin, is there any common mistakes or red flags that you're seeing in applications or the hiring process? And before we dive in to give people a second to think, I will share an anecdote that I've seen, not for a data role specifically, but we had a candidate in an interview process that I was in lie about using ChatGPT. And I don't think it was a problem that they were using ChatGPT. I think the problem was that they lied about using it. But we caught them when they shared their screen and like there they are typing the questions in. And just a thing to consider is like your integrity is something people are looking for too, especially in highly regulated fields. So with that, I'll turn it over for the hiring managers on the panel. Andie, hiring an intern counts. What are the things you're seeing right now?
I can start and give Andie some time. I think on the red flag side, I think Emma, you talked about it. Like I usually go on when I look at a resume and like I look at common like things that I'm looking for. So like if we're looking to build an LTV model, I'm looking for people who have built LTV models. And then that's probably the majority of the resume review as I'm looking through is like, have you worked on the project? Do you work for similar companies? Is it like, have you solved my problem before? That's the first thing I should look at. But then the red flag of that is I'm going to ask you a lot about that. And if you have, I built an LTV model with all the things, and then it becomes it was a group project, and maybe you were just the ride along person that wrote 2 lines of SQL, but it was an important project for the company, and you can't answer any questions about it. I'm questioning the entire integrity of the resume at that point, and we're probably not moving forward to the next step. So that's like a sort of like this exaggerated impact of like I worked on this big project, but it wasn't clearly stated that you were a piece, very small piece, and it wasn't your entire project. I think that's a red flag to me.
Yeah, I would say in terms of intern hiring, we received so many applications and did not expect it. For context, I think we released our application sometime in April for a June start internship. So like very quick turnaround. A lot of people already had internships, I assumed. And yet we had, I think, like 3,000 people apply within like the first few days. And this was purely from just like my team posting on LinkedIn saying we're hiring, solely on that, like not even kind of advertising elsewhere, and got a ton of feedback. So I think it's a really saturated market. And I think that whatever you can do to kind of stand out, whether it be kind of like, tapping into your network, or, being more specific about projects or kind of like linking out to stuff, I think that that's really helpful. I would say at the internship level, because this person was a lot more junior, I think what we were looking for more is someone less with like, oh, did you use like specific tools and things like that, which maybe at a more senior level, I think like to Taylor's point, like if you're super senior, like I would like you just use DBT. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. But if you're kind of an internship, like you probably haven't used that for the first time. So I would say that was definitely something more where it was like, do you have examples where you kind of like learned something new, like learned a new tool, say in a past internship or something. Have you learned a new language in the past year? Like, what was that like? I think those are kind of things you're looking for more at the junior level, like how like wouldn't say like malleable, but like how quick are you to adapting to new processes? Because at the end of the day, you know, we might all be comfortable with, say, using Python today or dbt, but there's always going to be some new shiny tool that people end up taking advantage of. And I think equally important to the role is like being able to adapt to whatever the newest, most modern data stack might look like.
I think that on the tooling side, being humble about it too. Like I usually ask like, so you have all these tools there, like give me the top ones and give me like 1 out of 10, how good are you? If you're saying 10 on 3 things, if you're saying 10 on any of the things and it's like a junior level role, I'm also like, there's no room for improvement. Like, where are you in your journey here? Where like you are applying for a intern level role, but you're a 10 out of 10 on SQL. And so I'm like, all right, what competition of SQL did you win? You know, there's not that I asked those in questions, but that's sort of like where my mind goes. So like, how can you prove that you're a 10 out of 10 on that? So I think that's like being honest about your like being like, you know, a 7 on the things you're really good at and like leveling that a little bit. I think is an
Right.
important
I'd
piece.
rather you come in at like a 6 or 7 and be like, hey, but I actually just recently learned about like these cool functions or something. I would rather you do that than tell me that you're like a 9
That-
and not be one.
That's an interesting point too. I've been working with SQL itself for, you know, over 15 years, and I refuse to call myself an expert in it because expert implies there's nothing more you can learn. Or I guess I refuse to call myself a master in it. And I've seen people say I'm a SQL master, I'm a SQL guru. I refuse to do that because that implies you've reached the top of your knowledge. You can't learn anything more, and you can always learn something more.
And that like new things wouldn't be invented in that time frame, right? Like that Snowflake wouldn't have specific functions, even if you'd used Redshift previously, that you wouldn't be familiar with.
I got my
I'm just
career started
waiting for
with
you to drop
Oracle.
your course, if that's the case. Like, where's your SQL course you're going to sell me after this? Because that's sort of why you were saying you were a master, right? Is to sell me something that I probably don't want to buy anyways.
Yeah.
It's really interesting too, having reviewed a lot of resumes, that it's always people with like a lot of experience who will give themselves, you know, 10, 20 years of work experience. And they're like, oh, I'm a 7 out of 10. And it's the like took a MOOC online 3 months ago for the first time person who's like, I'm a 5 out of 5. Humility is also a thing people are looking for during the interview process. And I love when people say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Or I don't know, here's how I would approach the problem. So I think this is really great feedback. For the benefits of the folks who are not on the call, I want to talk through the conversation in the chat a little bit for the recording. So a audience member asks, specific to Nick, do you mention the LTV project in the JD? Nick, do you want to voice through your response a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it sort of depends is my answer to it, like consultant's answer, I guess. But it depending on how long-lived projects are, I will put them in job descriptions or not. If it's a smaller project, I'm like, this is the next thing for this person to work on, and it's like less than a couple months worth of work, I probably won't put it in there. I'm at that point, I'm more talking about the themes of things. And so I sort of like gave my answer that I wrote was a little bit more along the lines of like, I look for someone that solves the LTV problem, but I'm probably going to have similar work streams. So I group them into something like experience working with marketing analytics projects, because it's sort of like the theme of that, such as LTV CAC attribution. And so if I'm a candidate and I see that in the job description, the top 3 things I put on my resume that I've done, right, is like I've built an LTV model, I've done CAC reporting, I have built an attribution model. Those are the 3 things, because when I scan your resume, that's what I would look to see, sort of like as projects, along with, you know, all the other things I listed in the job description. But if you have those top 3, that sort of makes you stand out.
Probably a point to emphasize there too is it is worth putting in a little bit of effort to customize your resume and or cover letter for that specific JD so you can do exactly what Nick outlined and make yourself stand out at the top of the stack. So I'm going to say maybe this is my last question and then we'll turn it over more directly to the audience. But I'm curious for folks who are on the job market. So you're looking for a new role, whether or not you have an existing role. Besides just, applying to jobs on LinkedIn, watching the LO Slack channel for new jobs, which I think is called I Need Staff. And I don't want to misspeak, for looking for staff. That's what it's called. What have you found to be helpful? And what suggestions do you have for folks not to be one of 10,000 applications to the data analyst role on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I would say I got, like, for the internship, and probably everyone on my team, I got hundreds of LinkedIn messages from people, hundreds of requests, many of which were very clear that you were just adding me to add me. And it was kind of another ask. I would say if you are going to try to hit up people at the company, I don't think that it's a bad thing at all. And I definitely am, like, a little annoying, I think, during the job search, but be selective of who you actually reach out to, right? Like, we all talk to each other, presumably, if we like work on the same team. So don't send us all the same exact message. I would say pick someone that you might actually have something in common with, right? Like, oh, we went to school together. Oh, I saw you at a locally optimistic event, right? Whatever it is, I think try to tailor it a little bit more to that person, rather than it being, I've had people just inbound say, hi, can you refer me to this job? Like, I don't know you. I don't know why you wanted to connect with me, anything. So I would say definitely, to the extent that you can make it personal, even if you don't like personally know the person. It's a lot of people in there. But even if you don't actually know the person, I think there are a lot of ways where you can still try to tap in and make it sound like you actively sought them out rather than pinging them desperately for a job.
I made a mistake, kind of a mistake a few months ago where, our company was hiring for some engineers. It wasn't data oriented. And I'm like, I'll help, get this out to my LinkedIn network. I'll share it out. And, I made the mistake of not saying I was not the hiring manager. I did not mention that. And then I also did not emphasize that the link I posted is how you apply. And I got a flood of messages from people I don't even know, just saying, hi, here's my resume. I'm interested. Please refer me. Like, I don't know you. I personally don't feel comfortable referring someone I've never worked with for a position that my company has. That just grates against me as an individual. But two, I mean, there's a link to all the job descriptions, and the link mentions how to apply. If there's a specific process, follow that process. Sure, I'm happy to help kind of nudge along if I can in the process. Say, hey, so and so reached out to me. I've worked with them in the past. I think they're great. Any chance, we can get their application reviewed faster or anything like that. But it's ultimately out of my hands unless I'm the actual hiring manager. And even then, there's still a company process to follow for recruiting. And I don't know how many hiring managers are out there that will actually jump part of the process for someone.
Especially not for like cold reach out. I think that like a lot, and it's a lot of like at the entry level roles, I get a lot of those where people reach out, and like I think it's like part of what they teach you in school these days is like you should connect with the hiring managers, correct, build your network on LinkedIn, and that's sort of how you get hired. I think that process is okay. I think it's just like the step that you do it in. I don't think it gets your resume reviewed. Your resume gets reviewed. I know someone and they can send a message to someone and like, hey, we work together. Like, I think they're a good person, maybe not the right fit for the role or not. That's where something that's like, I'm down to send that message to our recruiting team and hiring manager. Like, hey, I work with them. I thought they were really good in the role that we work together. Can you look at their resume? And then, if it's a fit, it's a fit. Totally up to, the hiring manager on that side. But the step that I think the like LinkedIn connection is like, hey, I have an interview scheduled for this company, and I would love to talk to you, the analyst, or someone else that's in a similar role to learn more about the role. That happened a lot at my last company. They reach out to some of the analysts a decent amount, and they would respond to that because at that point, it's like, we've shown interest in you, and now I'm just helping a candidate that could be my potential teammate. And I think that's a much better step in the process to engage. the cold reach out, here's my resume, can I have 15 minutes, like reject, absolutely not happening. I'm not even responding to your message. Sorry, like I just don't have time. It's just like it feels very cold. It doesn't feel like we're trying to build something here. It just feels like you're trying to get yourself up to the top of the pile. And I'm like, that's not what I'm about.
Taylor, how do you handle it when someone says, my buddy just applied, or this stranger pinged me on LinkedIn?
Mhm.
What does that look like from your perspective?
Mhm. Yeah, I think Brian, Andy, and Nick, you all made very great points, but especially in today's job market where we have so many applicants, it is hard to stand out. And as a recruiter, I'm getting hit up every single day with several invite requests. Funny enough, I pivoted from creative advertising into the data world, and I'm still getting people reaching out to me about creative jobs. And, my initial thought is, I don't want to connect with you. You haven't even looked at my profile to see that I'm not in this world anymore. I don't have those connections, or I'm not hiring for those types of jobs. So I think taking the 5 minutes to see what position that person has within that company, and also, I think continuing to follow the typical process, right? So you can still cold reach out, but apply online first. And then you can reach out to me and say, "Hey Taylor, I saw the data analyst position at Valier. I'm super interested. I already applied, would love if I can get to the top of the list," or, hope I'm a fit, or something short and sweet, right? So you're making the connection with me. Now we're connected on LinkedIn, and you also went through the process of applying, because at the end of the day, unless it is a very specific role where I'm having to go out and prospect and find a really niche skill set, I have a lot of candidates that are applying to the applicant tracking system, right? I'm going to use that technology that we've paid for to help go through those resumes. So with Nick saying, hey, add those couple bullet lines that are related to our job description, and make sure you have the right tools listed in there so that you are coming to the top of the list. We use Greenhouse. So you're coming to the top of the list in Greenhouse or Lever or whatever ATS you're using. But I think those little things can help put you at the top, but it doesn't mean you're automatically going to get a conversation with me, especially if you're not even looking to see. I mean, for example, had somebody reach out this week saying that there was a marketing role open that they were interested in and wanted to have a conversation. We don't have any such job listed on our website. So that automatically has me not interested in even wanting to connect with you, because you didn't take the 2 seconds to see that we have that job open, or to see if we even hire somebody like that.
This is awesome. Before I turn it over to the audience, if anyone wants to come off mute, I will say another thing that often makes candidates stand out is spending a little bit of time on your public profiles and putting yourself in places where you can be seen. So things like doing this panel or writing a blog post for Locally Optimistic is a great way to stand out. A little bit of a shameless plug there. If that's something you're interested in, reach out to any of the LO admins who can help put together a panel or help walk you through the process for writing a blog post on LO. We love contributions. There's no seniority requirement. You've got a story to tell. You've got an experience to share, a unique thought. We'd love to have you. So just a plug for another way to stand out there. I won't call our panelists out, but I will say when I put out this idea around the panel, some folks reached out to me and some folks I reached out to. So that is a very normal part of our process, is when we put out an idea for a panel or a discussion topic where people will say, here's why I'm a good fit. So another opportunity to participate, not just in LO, but kind of more broadly. All right, we've got some wonderful audience members here. Please feel free to come off mute and ask your question. This would be a great chance. Or you could always post in the chat or in the Slack channel.
I'm not afraid to speak up. Hi, everybody. My name's Joel. I just found out about Locally Optimistic earlier this week when I was networking with someone and I was asking, hey, what can I do to, get involved, meet new people? I'm in a new city. And he said, go to Locally Optimistic. So happy to be here. Would love to contribute with a blog post or whatever, get me hooked up with the admins. Um, I've been on a job search for about 6 months now, and I've probably put in close to 500 applications. What I found is that the job market's super saturated. So 10-second background on me. I worked for a consulting firm in the data and analytics practice for 3 years. And over the last year, I've been trying a more entrepreneurial adventure. Now I'm kind of looking to get back into a better structure and team environment. So what I found is that, like Taylor said, the recruiters are getting tons and tons and tons of inbound, and for these mid or entry level roles, it's like table stakes really to be able to write code in Python or SQL, and they're not going to respond to you just saying, hey, can we have a conversation? The ways that I've had success in my job search is by really leveraging my network and trying to build warm intros. So if I see a role at Andie's company is open, I'm going to go into the people, section of LinkedIn and type in people with the role title that I'm looking for, right? And then I'm going to try to connect with them and say, hey, I'm really interested in this open role at your company. I would love to learn your perspective on it. And that's typically, it's not 100%, but you're not at the same 1% hit rate of easy applying to LinkedIn. So just being able to and the thing is, sometimes you don't even really want to say that you're looking for a job, just that you're interested in what they do and want to connect. And it's kind of like the meme you see online that's like the handsome guy saying something to the woman in the cubicle and she's like, oh, you're so sweet, and then the big fat guy comes after and says the same thing and she goes, hello HR. So really, like, if you get your messaging right around, here's who I am, and here's what I'm looking for, and here's why I'm interested in you, and make them the focal point, you're going to have a lot better chance to convert that into just an opportunity for a coffee chat. And then once you're in front of them, that's when you're able to show some of your personality, share some of your past experience, and then coming out of that, they might think, oh, this person would be great for X, Y, and Z role on my team, or this person will be I know someone else in my network who I would love to introduce to this person. So really leading your search with more authenticity of just actually searching than wanting to fill an open role has gotten more success with me. My main question is, and sorry to take the time and go long wind there. My question is, the consulting firm I worked at in the past served a lot of clients in the public sector and state government, mostly was a big client for me. As I'm going out to industry, say I'm looking at a marketing analytics job or a operational analytics job, a lot of the pushback I'm getting is, oh, well, you don't have experience in, say, marketing analytics, and because there's saturation, there's so many qualified candidates. When they're going to fill the marketing analyst role, they're going to look for someone with marketing analytics experience. So how do I bridge that gap with my transferable and foundational knowledge of data into applying it into these kind of niche roles? Because when recruiters are looking to hire, they're looking to hire someone they know who can do a job, not someone who they think is smart and can figure stuff out.
Would any of our panelists like to start? If not, I can jump in while people think about an answer. I think the biggest thing is so much of the job market is supply and demand. And so if I can get a candidate who's 99% qualified with the experience that I want in the pay range that I have, I'm going to choose the better qualified candidate. And so thinking about how you can tell the experience, tell the story with your experience, or tell the story of why you're better qualified in some other way. So to build off something Nick mentioned earlier, and Nick, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is I might choose a candidate who hasn't done the LTV project before because they have some other experience, but you have to sell me on whatever that looks like. So Nick, what do you think?
I think you're spot on. It's like what makes you unique and better than everybody else. Ultimately, it's sort of like hiring is a little bit of a competition. So if you don't have marketing analytics experience for a marketing analytics job, it's going to be tough. It's going to be the case because there's going to be someone that has marketing analytics experience. And so you got to think about, okay, what problems do they need to solve? And how does my consulting experience outweigh the experience that that person has in marketing analytics? And it probably is like for consultants, what I've seen that be really well is like, hey, I am phenomenal at presenting my findings. I can stand up in front of the board and I can present the heck out of this stuff. And like those are the things that like you can highlight of like maybe you didn't build the LTV model, but maybe you're the person that put together all the slides that presented how we're going to improve our margins using someone else's LTV model. And so like you can take that, and I'm really hammering down the LTV piece, but like you can take
Yeah.
something that built was foundational for the marketing thing and you can be the one that like levels that up. Because in a lot of cases for like smaller companies like startups, like the word level up is important. Like I go from this state to like, we need to do marketing analytics. But if I can take our marketing analytics practice with one person and bring it to here, and you're that person, great. You're probably getting the job over the like, 90 fits the box to a T marketing analytics person.
Yeah, I mean, I'll push
Sorry,
back on that.
sorry, Joel, we're at time, so I'm going to end us here. Please feel free to continue the conversation in Slack. But thanks so much, folks, for attending. We'll post the recording to YouTube. And thank you again. We love putting these on. If you have requests, please reach out to the admins. Otherwise, have a great Wednesday, a great rest of your week. Thank you again to our panelists for joining, and it's been wonderful hosting you. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, bye.